Disclaimer, this video contains my opinion. Is hype in anime a good thing or a bad thing? When an anime has a lot of hype behind it, you'd think that that'd be a good thing, but that isn't always the case. Sometimes an anime having a lot of hype behind it isn't exactly the best thing for it. When there's a lot of hype surrounding a show, it often isn't a good thing. This is especially the case with newer animes that just came out. There's so many times where I see a show that a bunch of people say is incredible, but there's only a couple episodes out about it. And a lot of the hype around these episodes is recency bias. Just because it's new doesn't necessarily mean it's good, which is why I often have to wait a couple of years before I start watching an anime. I don't usually watch it week to week unless it's in a series that already has multiple seasons out, because you can never tell by public opinion whether it's good or not, because it just started coming out. People often don't have a good grasp on whether the show is good or not because they haven't seen enough of it to be able to tell. And often this overhype on new animes that just came out really dissuades me from watching them, because I can't get a more unbiased opinion on if the show is actually good or not. Because oftentimes, even when I first watch a show, I think that it's better than when I go back and I watch it or I think about it after the fact, because I don't have that bias of I just watched it or it's a new show. That's why it took me so long into getting into newer shows that I actually ended up liking, because I was worried that they might have been a little bit skewed because they were newer shows that just came out. This was the case for shows like Spy x Family, Tokyo Revengers, Blue Lock, or Ranking of Kings. And overall, I liked all of those shows, some more than others, but I feel like I would have appreciated them more if there wasn't so much hype behind them. The reason why I believe this is the case is because, at least for me, often when animes have a lot of hype surrounding them, or people say that they're incredible, when you go to watch them, you're expecting a lot. So therefore, if the anime happens to not meet your expectations, you're a lot more disappointed than you would have been if there wasn't that much hype surrounding it. And of course, an anime having some sort of hype, especially when it's new, is unavoidable, but it definitely affects how much I enjoy the show. As well as when a show is overhyped, it really puts a hamper on my experience with the show. One example I had with this was actually Steins Gate, which everyone said was amazing, and I thought it was an alright show, but because everyone hyped it up so much and said it was so incredible and was one of the best shows they had ever seen, I expected a lot more out of it than what it actually ended up giving me. Now, it is overall a great time travel anime. The way they did time travel was very well done, but in terms of how people talked about it, I did expect it to do more stuff that was out of the box. Maybe I'm more biased because I didn't see it when it first started coming out and I saw it quite a few years after it came out, but I just don't think it deserved the amount of hype that it got. Again, I don't think it was a bad show, I just think that the overhype really ruined the experience for me. Another show that my experience was soured with because of the overhype on it is Demon Slayer. I overall think Demon Slayer is an okay show. I don't really have any problems with it. I just feel like it doesn't really break the mold. It's nothing new, but that's not exactly a bad thing. It does its tropes and it does what it's meant to be well. It just doesn't really do anything different, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, and the animation is very good, but the way some people talk about it is a little bit over-exaggerated. Some people talk about Demon Slayer saying that Demon Slayer is one of the best shows they've ever seen, and that very well might be true depending on what they've watched, but I feel like a lot of people overestimate what Demon Slayer really has to offer. In terms of what Demon Slayer does have to offer, which is mostly its incredible animation, it does that very well. But in terms of the actual story and the characters, even though I like the characters, they are just predetermined anime tropes. Now, that doesn't mean they're bad, but I don't think it's all that special to warrant the amount of hype it has behind it. Because of the overhype, that is given to Demon Slayer, it is often in the conversation of being on the same level as some of the most beloved anime series. And although I don't think Demon Slayer is bad, I think that is a severe overestimation of what the show really is. Again, the animation is beautiful, but animation doesn't really make a story. Another thing I've noticed with hype, although it's not as much hype as it is anticipation, and it's very much more avoidable than hype over a new anime and not really knowing what to expect with it, is drawing out your anime and putting a lot of emphasis on something that happens later in the show. Now, I don't know if I really explained that very well, but what I'm talking about is in an anime like Steins Gate. When I was watching Steins Gate, I heard a lot of people say to just wait for the series to get better. And the wait period that people said that the anime was going to get better at, as they said, the time period of waiting just became longer and longer until it was around halfway through the series and nothing had really happened. And sometimes waiting like that is completely fine, especially in a longer series or a wait period that comes into a bigger payoff. But for Steins Gate, to me, it really just didn't seem like a worthy payoff for waiting half the series. And of course, there's many other animes that have this problem as well. Although the wait time on Steins Gate wasn't unnecessary filler, I feel like the wait time was too long for the actual idea of the series to be explained. Of course, the main essence of the series being time travel had been explained before, but if it takes over half the series to get rid of the confusing aspects, then it's really just not something I prefer. Of course, there is good aspects about having mystery at the beginning of a series, but when it continues on to the middle of the series and really no progress has been made to figure out that mystery, it starts getting kind of repetitive and boring after a while. Again, I in no way say that Steins Gate is a boring show. I did enjoy it, but I did find myself being quite disappointed towards the end of the series when I realized that it wasn't as good as people made it out to be. Another aspect of hype that I do find to be more avoidable is seasonal hype. And one of the best examples of this is in The Promised Neverland Season 2. Season 1 of The Promised Neverland topped charts and made people's list of one of the best opening seasons to an anime that they had ever seen. So when Season 2 unfortunately fell so flat, it was a much bigger blow to the franchise than it would have been if that was the first season instead of the second. Because the second season already had so much hype behind it because of the success of the first season, it did fall a lot flatter than it would have been if it was just a standalone series, because people would not have been expecting so much out of it. If a show like Attack on Titan that was known to have very good storytelling and is mostly consistent were to have a second, third, or fourth season like The Promised Neverland's, it would have been a very hard-hitting matter for the franchise because the people who watched the show just expected better. Of course, this can be avoided if the show keeps at a constant pace and stays consistently good throughout the course of its runtime. Overall, I think that hype might more negatively affect a series than it affects it positively. It's very rare that a series can live up to very high expectations given to it by the hype surrounding it. Also, the hype surrounding new shows, although it might bolster its popularity, it isn't necessarily good for the show. A show having super high expectations when it first starts off isn't really a good thing, especially when the show can't meet that expectation. Although I do like how the hype surrounding a show brings the community of that show together to support that show and brings more popularity to it, overall, I'd say that hype is both a negative and positive aspect to a show. But I think that I encounter more negative aspects of that hype than positive aspects. But of course, that is just my opinion, and I hope you enjoyed this video. Goodbye!